Well, hello everybody, this is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to your Critique of the Week. It's Friday, February 21st. Thanks so much for joining me. Let's see, who do we have here today? Got a whole great group. We've got over 40 people watching already. So glad so many people are here. Janet McConaughey is here. Dr. Q. Jamie Thomas over there. We got Mark Grenier. Hello, Mark. Winston Munn's there. Jamie Thomas, I already said that. Petty Arbor. Lynn Schilling. Lots of discussion going on already, too. Nancy Sabanik is here. Amy Dower-Solorzano. Dee Coleman. Steve Harrell. Holly York. Paul Bolt. Maria Berg. Cindy Guntherman. Hammett Malik is here. Jerry Stephenson. Katie Dozier, of course. David Boos is here. Shape of Soup. We got Sharon Ferrante in the house. Jamal Udin is here. Great. We got Kimberly Gibson-Tran. Desi Cochran. Yeah, great group of people on hand. Rachel Grieve is here. Paul Bolt, good to see you all. Anything going on Facebook? Donna Bess over there, hanging out with Facebook. Hey, Donna. All right, so today's the Critique of the Week, and what we're going to do is what we always do, which is to go over poems. This is the answer to the common request for people to have feedback on their submissions. You can't get feedback individually when you get hundreds and hundreds of submissions a day, but we can do them publicly in a live format that allows everybody to be helped by it. So what we do every week is people who submit, and you go to rattle.com/page/critique now. If you haven't noticed, the website is updated. Maybe I'll give a look at that right now. If you go over to the website, it's a whole new rattle.com, and up on the menu bar there, if you click on content and then critique of the week, you will see the critique of the week page. Let me get rid of these things too. So it's the same critique of the week page as always. Let me shrink this down a little bit. And if you'd like to share poems, the only difference is the URL is we have page now in the URL because they're just complicated, web reasons. We had to have it in a folder. So it's rattle.com/page/critique now. And if you look down here, you'll see, well, it's one of our critiques there, but there's click to submit button. If you'd like to share poems, all you got to do is send like 2 poems in, and then we'll go over them at some point. And we talk about what works and what doesn't, all that great stuff that can be really helpful both to us as we're doing this, talking about it. We all learn from the process of thinking about poems in this way. And we help writers out a lot too. And so that's what we're going to do right now. And we tend to go in the order the poems were received. I want to check to see if we have any familiar faces. I hadn't done that. I was on a phone call trying to find a missing tax document right before the show. And so I didn't have time to check to see who is here. Let's see. We'll probably just dive into the oldest ones, but let me flip through the names really quickly. And you, of course, can't see this right now. Okay, yeah, no one's popping out as a regular who submitted recently. So I think we will just jump into the oldest poem in the queue and get started. The oldest poet is, let's see, Partha Sarkar. And Partha submits poems a lot. And I think there's a limit, too. I think once a year is nice. But we've done Partha in the last year, so I'm just going to put that down as a no right now. Honestly, I think there are a few people that just sort of, for lack of a better word, spam us with submissions and then don't really have anything going on. So, I mean, no interaction other than that, and just sending poems, past the guidelines and the rules. And I think that'll lesson to you, Partha. Just slow it down. For Critique of the Week, it's like once a year we want to participate. Let's go instead to Deal Ikiora from where would this be? Nigeria. And there's a general question field in the submissions. The general question is this: there appears to be different notions of what poetry is. It shows in our choice of words and in our critique. Some of it is pure bullshit or even hubris with nothing to do with literature. Conformism is brother to identity, yet the enemy of it. How do we find a balance between those contradictions? Well, that's always interesting. I don't know. That's what the Critique of the Week is always about, is finding ways to connect with people and say something original. And that's what we're trying to do with poetry just in general. And that's what we try to do with the Critique of the Week. We'll talk about the poems in here as we go. So we have a poem pasted in. This is When Peace Returns to Odessa. So this will be good discussion about political poems, news poems, I think. When peace returns to Odessa sounds like a poem that's a little bit political. So let's see what we've got here. Let me get these little filters back on to clean up the view. There we go. Okay, so this is the poem. It was pasted in. The title is up in the top, so you can't really see it, but this is the poem. Longing for almonds and Kiev bread, I sing, thinking about Socrates and the world. The grains that ride through Odessa's ship bring time's clouds unfurls. Humanity unfold. Children are the past lives of the aged man. And rain the sound of currents and tides dancing. Conformism is the brother of identity, yet the enemy of it. I yearn for the time when peace will return, when Russian armor and drones will no longer land, when sirens cease, war deaths and casualties end. Will Putin put his vision of great Russia at bay, to be without the swallowing of Ukraine? For over 30 years, this volcanic dream erupts in blood. Ukraine is Ukraine and never Russia, nor do they want to be. So this just gets into that, and this is the only poem that was sent. When peace returns to Odessa, this gets at what we always talk about, and I talk about on the prompt lines or open lines, or the Poets Respond section of the Rattlecast frequently. Just last week, I was talking about this. If you're writing news poems or just anything about politics, it's really difficult to have an outcome that's actually poetry, let's say. And I think this is another example of what doesn't work as a poem, because a poem is reaching beyond what we know to some deeper understanding. That's what art really is. It's a way of finding out what we didn't know we knew, what we haven't yet articulated, that we sort of have a feeling about, and turning those feelings into words, or turning those feelings into a painting or a sculpture or anything like that. If it's something that we know already, that we already have a strong opinion about, it's really hard to make it a creative piece of art. And what you end up having is poems like this and so many others. It's the majority of Poets Respond submissions, which are just telling a political opinion. And maybe there's a place for that somewhere. I don't call it poetry. I don't think it is. And, you can use poetic tools to make, social media posts. I think that if the goal of a poem is to share your opinion about, when something, what would be good to happen politically or something like that, they're just much better ways to go about spreading that opinion than writing a poem. And so I don't know. So what you want to do, how would you make this a poem, is by seeing the actual, feeling the connection. Like why do you feel compelled to write about this? And then how does it relate to you? What is it that you don't understand that you think you might understand? I mean, you have to be reaching for something. There has to be a question that you haven't answered yourself yet. And if there's not anything there, if you already have a strong opinion about it, it's just not the material for a poem. And so, and I think that's the case. There's nothing added here that expands outward consciousness about the situation. So that is my general thoughts on this. It's the kind of thing that just doesn't work as something to do in a poem. Yeah. So D. Coleman says that the poet could change this into a personal piece with real people in a story. Yeah. I mean, if you know some story about it, you have some connection to it. If you know, things that are less known, and you can piece together some kind of web of understanding that we might not have. So those are the kind of things we can think about adding to the poem. But as Cindy Gutherman says, it's a political statement without poetry in it. And poetry is just not a political statement. Sheba Soup puts it this way: political poetry requires compelling duality, I think. Yeah, it's gotta. I mean, Emily Dickinson said, "Tell the truth, but tell it slant." And the slant doesn't mean obscure it and make it hidden and don't let you know what you're talking about. It's you have to undercut our sense of our sort of. Really, what's happening is that we have these models, these constructs for the world, and what art does is undercut them and expand them and change them and shape them. And so you have to have some kind of thing that's wrong about your political opinion in order to write a political poem. Has to be some contradiction there. There has to be some cognitive dissonance that you're releasing. You have to have some kind of feeling. That's really, poems spring from cognitive dissonance, from that idea that one part of you thinks one way, another part of you thinks the other, and they haven't come to terms and talked to each other yet. And in the process of a poem, you can find the connection and get those two sides. I am, I contain multitudes, that kind of thing. Getting those different parts of yourself connecting and talking. And so if there's like something you find unsettling about your political opinion, that's where to write a political poem that really works. It's a tool for understanding things and understanding yourself. But if you know the opinion already, you're just going to start where you finish where you started, and nothing really happens. And that's why it doesn't work as a poem. Yeah. Let's see. Well, let's see. Sarah Rashid Khan says, I hope this isn't taken the wrong way, but respectfully, the Poets Respond poem earlier this week about the anglerfish had so many lines that summarized everything else everyone was saying about it. Let's actually take a look at that, because and that can be a good way of understanding what we're talking about here. So let's go back to that poem that was Sea Devil by Seth Peterson. And here it is, Sea Devil by Seth Peterson on the new Rattle.com. And we'll read this poem and see what the difference is here. Okay? Maybe I'll shrink this down. Okay. Sea Devil. And this is about that video of the anglerfish that was surfacing. It's a deep sea creature, very rarely comes up from the depths. And let's see why this works, even though it's not really a political poem. But as Sarah Rashid Khan says, it's a poem that is written about something that went viral and people had a lot of thoughts and were talking about it. And so Sarah makes the point that it was rehashing a lot of what people were already saying. So what makes this different? How does it work? So let's take a look. Sea Devil by Seth Peterson. It was not curiosity so much as a calling that brought the fish paddling up through the gradient of ocean. Now, first of all, just in the very beginning, calling it paddling up through the gradient of ocean. And just saying gradient of ocean, and that's a poetic turn that makes the discussion more vivid to start with. So that's one way it's adding to what we have. It's describing some things that people were thinking as they were sharing this article, but it was articulating that in a more complicated, interesting, memorable way through words. So that's part of it too, but that's not the one thing that matters really. Anyway, the hideous yaw of her mouth opened as if in astonishment, exposing rows and rows of teeth. Pointed like beliefs she hadn't yet questioned. Her eyes were like sequins pinned in place. So again, the detail, like no social media posts, as much as this was shared and went viral, said her eyes were like sequins pinned in place. Like that is poetry turning those thoughts into this concrete, discrete thing that's really memorable. And if you see that image again, you might think of that line, that they're like sequins pinned in place. Her skin tarnished gray with soot from the ovens of something hellish, which she must have known to be cold and black and infinite. I can't imagine how she lived with that dim green light always burning, always unreachable, no matter how hard she swam for it. And so this is maybe one of the things Rashid is talking about, where it's summarizing kind of what people were thinking. I think that went viral because a lot of it, other than it's a horrific and fascinating image of that fish, it's also like putting ourselves in its place and like thinking what that must be like to completely change. I mean, it'd be like us ending up in outer space or something. It's so weird to change your environment and how confusing that must be. So that's fascinating. And that's what a lot of people were thinking about. But again, I mean, the poem is settling into that what's the word? Personification? That's not the right word. But anyway, it's empathizing with the fish in an interesting way, which is what some people have done. So I agree that that's not like a super original thought, but it is articulating that thought and generating and developing it deeper. Anyway, I can't imagine how she lived with that dim green light always burning, always unreachable, no matter how hard she swam for it. Her rigid, disheveled body like something had slipped its shackles and sprinted as an earthworm does to rain. So comparing that with this metaphor of an earthworm, sprinting out of the surface, is another interesting, comparison that probably wasn't shared by anybody else. It's a very original thought. How it must have felt to see the depths recede and that bluish-green dream world emerge, the sifting light, the silt and bubbles exploding like miniature galaxies. Again, these are like original descriptions of what of what people were thinking about, but it was articulating that in an interesting way. Those who saw her say her ash-colored body glistened, her thin fins looked like wings. Watching her spin was like watching a fallen angel ascending to heaven. And so here, in you can see how the poem was structured. And if you watch the Rattlecast, Seth talked about the poem kind of wrote itself. And you can see that in describing like what people were thinking and what he was thinking, his own emotional response and his thoughts, describing the scene in that video and imagining, being the fish and what that experience must be like. He ends up with this line, watching her spin was like watching a falling angel ascending to heaven. And that shifted it, that became a metaphor, a descriptive metaphor that spun the poem off into a new direction of meaning. And I don't think he knew he was going in this place when he wrote that line, but that line came to him because it was a subconscious trying to tell him something about the way he was fascinated by that image. And it went to that, and then he followed that lead to where the poem ends up going. So does that mean she was happy? And when the devil nears his end, will he rise like will he also rise like a fish? Will the light call him like a bell behind a doorway? Or will it wait there in silence for someone or something to open it? And so it becomes this poem about sort of evil and redemption and what, facing the consequences will be like. So it ends up being this metaphor for a lot of the bad things happening in the world. What will, the devil getting his due? And it becomes that. And that maybe, that was the underlying, unspoken emotional resonance that Seth felt watching. And he found that through writing the poem. And that's how that works. So it was that describing it until you got to the interesting metaphor. And then why did that metaphor emerge? And what is it relating to? Well, it's relating to, the deeper meanings that are all around us right now. All the things that other people are writing about in Poets Respond, all the political poems about, Trump and Elon Musk and things like that. What is the devil going to experience at the end of his day? And, what will be waiting on the other side? And that's an interesting thing to think about. And that expands the poem into more than just what a description of the image and what everybody was thinking about. And maybe articulating what a lot of people were feeling, how it related to the zeitgeist and why it went viral. And there's a lot going on there. But it only works as a poem because of this turn. Because once we found this fallen angel image and decided that that's what we were doing, and we ran with that a little bit, that's the surprising turn that made the poem go from one place to another. That's what made it transformative. We leapt from our original understanding of this fish in this situation to a whole new meaning that was sort of buried beneath that. And that's what makes the poem work. A poem is a magic spell. A magic spell transforms something. If you want to turn lead into gold, that's what the magic spell does, right? But if it turns lead into lead, it's not a magic spell. The magic doesn't work. And poems have to transform your original initiating state into some new state, into some new feeling, into some new emotion, into some new idea, new understanding, new model of the world. And that's what, with that turn, that's what this poem does. Okay. Yeah. And so, let's see. Manny says, I don't think we need to make it political in any particular direction. Yeah, and it's true, too. It's a very broad, it's not necessarily, about Trump and Musk, like I said. That's just what most people are writing about right now. But it could be about the Biden crime family. It doesn't really make a difference. It could be about Putin or Zelensky. It doesn't really matter. Whoever is, the enemy or the evil in the world, whoever's that archetype of that for you in the moment, can be personified by this anglerfish, the devil's anglerfish, I think it's called. So, and then there you go too. Rachel Grieve said, I wasn't articulating it very well. My take on the term is different. The devil also yearning for the light. And I'm sorry, I kind of missed that. Yeah, that's the thing. Does the devil actually want to be good? Is like the question that's underlying all this too, which I forgot to mention. It's that idea that it's seeking and rising, chasing this light, even though, it's a wonder if it really understands that, and that's all tied up in this poem. So I agree with you, Rachel. I just didn't express it very well. Let's see. Okay, so that's what this poem does. And if you go back to when peace returns to Odessa, you'll see that it just doesn't do that. It stays in the same spot that it started. And, longing for almonds and Kiev bread, I sing, thinking about Socrates and the world, the grains that ride through Odessa's ship, bringing time's clouds unfurls. So, and the other thing I want to talk about this poem is that there's a lot of like skipped articles, a lot of things, a lot of sort of typos and misspeech, and I think it's important to write like you talk, and that's another thing too. All the little articles and the ofs and the ands and things, that's part of the music of speech, and when we don't say them, it comes off as unmusical. I think that's what happens here too. So there's that too. Write like you talk, and then find the thing that you don't quite understand in your poem, and that's the right direction to go with this. Okay, let's see. We'll go to another poem next, and once again, that was Del Ichiora with that submission. Note that we talked about it and then go on to the next poem. And next we have, and I should say one thing too about that anglerfish poem. It's the fact is, Rachel Grieve was saying that yearning for the light that the devil does, there's something that it's really hard to articulate about that poem. And that's what makes it really profound, is that it's not some simple thing that's really easy to paraphrase. It's that there's this feeling, and it gets closer to the heart of what that feeling and understanding was that you're feeling as you're thinking about this connection. And so, the fact that it's a little hard to express, but you can feel it, is what makes it actually a really good poem. So that's another aspect of it too. And how do you do that? Well, that's the big mystery. I don't know how to answer that really, but we try every week. Okay, so next up we have Janet Goldberg from California, Southern California. And Janet sent 2 poems. Any general questions? No general questions. So let's take a look at this. And first off we have... Get a good size on here. Hang on. Okay. It's so easy to fall into the abyss. I think, this is called That's Life. Sorry. It's up in the... You want to put your title in the poem, by the way, too, in the document itself. The title is part of the poem. And so, so don't just label the file or whatever, the poem. Put it actually above the first line. Not that, it wouldn't really matter much. If it's a great poem, it doesn't matter how it's formatted, but it really is helpful to read, because then you're confused at first, then you have to hunt for the title on Submittable. Anyway, That's Life. Let's see. It's so easy to fall. Wait, let me ask you one question first. So Morgan Phoenix says Shape of Soup has been waiting. Perhaps we could do them soon. And so Shape of Soup. Who? What's the name? Because that's actually a problem with this format. Is that if you're using a handle, then I don't know where you are in the submission. So let me know your name, and we'll see if I can find you on there. Okay, after this poet though. Mike Rolane. Okay, so we'll look for that in a minute. Thanks. Yeah. Shape of Soup's been great. Great comments. So we'll get to Mike's poem soon. Okay. So this is That's Life, or maybe it's called Better Than New, actually, because the title and the subject line are different. So I don't even know what the title is. So that's one of the reasons why you put the title in. Anyway, let's call it Better Than New, I guess. Okay. It's so easy to fall into the abyss, the quicksand of questions and what ifs. Why is it that I go there? Why not look to the mountaintop where angels, seeing all, are busy with my care? Now I am on my way to a place called Better Than New. I've spent almost 50 years traveling, each highway before me, stretching view, arms, pathways wide to behold what lies beyond, then close in that bent trunk and that hanging microscopic spider. What are you telling me? Silence is needed, especially now, except for the ever-present chirp, chirp, chirping that refuses containment and rules. I am jumpy out of my skin, feeling my aliveness. And yet, I've never been here before. It's so quiet here. I have everything my body and heart have ever yearned for. This will not last. That very thought I had 2 sentences ago, has drilled into the atmosphere. I am inhaling it and exhaling something new, something better than new, if I can stay on the safe edge of gratefulness, patience, and kindness. Okay, so that's the first poem. I think it was titled Better Than New. I think this is interesting. This poem has a few nice runs of of poetry where the poetry sort of breaks out for a moment. And I think if you can find the mental, spiritual, psychological shape or of the space that you were in mentally when you got those lines out, I think that's what you should be pursuing as you're writing. Yeah. So, yeah, Jamie Thomas says there's some nice lines here, but I'm going to need a second read. Yeah, me too. So, let's just read it again, and we'll talk about it maybe as we go more slowly. It's so easy to fall into the abyss, the quicksand of questions and what ifs. I like the quicksand of questions. And you can hear, when the music of poetry generates thoughts and understanding. And that's really the trick and the key to formal poems, is that they, using rhyme and meter, draw out the understandings and ideas that you hadn't really thought of yet or realized you were thinking about. And I think the sounds here, the quicksand of questions, is a really nice run. And I just love that phrase. And the break is really nice too. And so that's one of those places where I think the line really sung. And then we fall back into a more, talky, less detailed. Cindy Gunther says, I want a real story. And David Booth says, I don't get a sense of who the poet is. And Hamet Malik says, more details would help us. So all those things are things I completely agree with. And so in this poem, we have these little runs where the poem works, and there's some energy coming out, but I don't really know the source and what's going on with them. It's sort of like, I don't know, like it's like releasing some energy, but it's very confusing as to how or where. So follow that where you have energy in the poem, where things are surprising you and coming out more spontaneously, and write more toward that light. Be like the anglerfish going toward the light, and see what's there on the other side of the surface of that. So anyway, the quicksand of questions and what ifs. Why is it I go there? Why not look to the mountaintop where angels, seeing all, are busy with my care? And so here you can feel, it doesn't have that same, spontaneous music. It feels more forced in this, just in the language. This is the poem not finding itself. Now I'm on my way to a place called Better Than New. And so here a new idea emerges from the writing process. I spent almost 80 years traveling each highway before me, stretching view, arms, pathways wide to behold what lies beyond. Do you feel how there's a rhythm that picks up in this section? It's the same kind of rhythm that we got in that brief, the quicksand of questions. And we get a kind of rhythm here too, when it's the subconscious speaking and when creativity is flowing a little bit. And that's what I'm talking about, writing toward this feeling. It's also where some concrete images start to emerge too, and that's no surprise there, because that's just how things work. When it starts coming out spontaneously, when you're not trying, you're letting yourself run with language, more interesting things come out. When you're trying to force it and imposing your will on it, you have too much willful will, interesting things don't come out. And so writing toward this area is what I would do. More of that and less of the chatty, the stuff that doesn't have a lot of detail and image and story. So here I've spent almost 80 years, traveling each highway before me, stretching view, and we get that image of the highway. So then the mind is riffing on that image. Stretching view, arms, pathways wide to behold what lies beyond. And that then close in that bent trunk and that hanging microscopic spider. What are you telling me? Silence is needed especially now, except for the ever-present chirp, chirp, chirping that refuses containment and rules. And so here I think we lose it again with what is the ever-present chirp, chirp, chirping? I don't know that, and we didn't follow that. We went to an abstraction, refuses containment and rules, and that doesn't tell us anything. So anytime we feel we're getting vague and we're getting away from image and specificity and story, that's when we need to reassess, refocus our energy and point it in the direction of storytelling or of image or of music. Those are the three elements that make poetry work. And if you're not doing that, if you're going toward vagueness and abstraction, then that's the wrong direction. So we went from the chirp chirping has a possibility there if we ran with it, but then we left it. I don't really know what it was. I am jumpy out of my skin, feeling my aliveness, and yet I've never been here before. It's so quiet here. I have everything my body and heart have ever yearned for. So I don't know who the I am. Still haven't figured out who the speaker is, other than they're 80 years old, I guess. And where here is. So I don't know who. I've never been here before. So that's a statement we have, but I don't know who I is. I don't know where here is. And I don't know before what. I mean, before now, but when's now? So we don't have any sense of what this line even means. It's so quiet here. Where? I have everything my body and heart have ever yearned for. This will not last. But that very thought I had 2 sentences ago. And then I would avoid saying something like 2 sentences ago, because then you have to stop and be like, what was 2 sentences ago? Was it the I have everything my body and heart have ever yearned for? Or is that, I guess that's 2 sentences ago. That very thought I have 2 sentences ago has drifted into the atmosphere. And I said drilled before, you're right. Has drifted into the atmosphere. I am inhaling it and exhaling something new, something better than new. If I can stay on the safe edge of gratefulness, patience, and kindness. About what and why aren't you? So we just don't get any really story. And that's the problem. Yeah. Cindy Gumna says, is it someone in a care center now? I mean, all we can do is guess. And so there's just not enough storytelling in this poem for us to really understand and appreciate it. And I think the, talking about this highway, when you do that and the spiders, like, what is that? Like, dive into those images. Kimberly Gibson Tran says, I like imagining the speaker as a trucker. Yes, my brain reaches for any story. And that's what we do. I think that's a great way to put it. We're desperate for a story. We want to hear the story, but we don't get the story here. So tell us what's actually going on. Who are you? We don't know who you are. It's Janet Goldberg, but I don't know I don't know who Janet Goldberg is. And I want to. I want to know the story that you're trying to share, but we don't have the context and the details. Yeah, Morgan Phoenix says, I like the idea of the safe edge of kindness, but I need it to be a concrete image. Yeah, and that's just it. So much comes down to that. Like, these submissions come in, and you read them, and you can sort of feel that there's something there that the poet was trying to write about, but we don't get a sense of what it is, or we have no idea, and then we just have to move on. And I think, if we were to publish this, readers would be confused and not take anything from it. That's the problem. We need the story, we need image, we need detail. And there are a few places where those came out, so focus on what your mental state was while you were writing that and dive deeper into that. And the way that anglerfish poem, saw the angel and then thought, why am I thinking of angels? Well, this is a devilfish, and then pushed forward into devils searching for light and what that would be like. So tell a story. Okay. Let's take a look at the other poem, see if it has the same kind of issues. This, I believe, is Let's Monkey Around. Pretty short poem. It's 4:30 in the morning, and I've been sleeping on a calm ocean on my belly. The surf laps me with soft blankets and laps again and laps again. And he softly says, want to monkey around. The sleeping pill still floats me. And I whisper back, want to sloth around? Let's grab a branch and hang. Me breathing him, he breathing me. It's just clinging to life in this forest where silence is breaking and the birds now chirping, the dark sky is now milky, the cage is now open, monkeys everywhere. Let's see. Yeah, Kimberly Gibson Tran is a vivid scene to start. Yeah. Let's see. Jerry Seven says, rattle this one, 4.8 shaker, Gulf Island. My words are slipping down the screen. How is it? Well, stay safe. Is there an earthquake right then, Jerry? That's interesting. Okay. Yeah, and so this poem starts out, like a few people have mentioned already, with a nice image. We unlike the last poem, we don't know who the speaker is really, but we have a sense of place and like what's going on, and so we care a lot more about this. Hang on one second. I have a. Okay, so so it's 4:30 in the morning. I've been sleeping on a calm ocean on my belly. The surf laps me with soft blankets and laps again, and he softly says, want to monkey around? The sleeping pill still floats me, and I whisper back, want to sloth around? And I think that's the best line. As Maney said, a fun poem, and it's that sloth around is a fun idea. And I think I would, dive more into that image. We go with it a little bit with let's grab a branch and hang. And then I think this is the missing turn, the missed opportunity in the poem, where we go, me breathing him, he breathing me. It's just us clinging to life in this forest where silence is breaking. I think we'd go better to no pun intended, but hang with the sloth a little more and, imagine what slothing around would feel like. And that's where the fun of the poem really is. So push that, what would it like to, as opposed to monkeying around, what would slothing around be? And it's an opportunity to be really fun with the poem. And instead we sort of get a kind of, we shift into the vagueness that was creeping in a little bit and not, and then summarizing a little bit of what's going on. So me breathing him, he breathing me, it's just us clinging to life in this forest where silence is breaking. The birds now chirping, the dark sky is now milky, the cage is now open, monkeys everywhere. Yeah, and Faye Sarala says, I'd like to see the poem revert back to the ocean imagery at the end, pull it back together. Yeah, Kimberly Gibson Tran, I think this is the key, says this has a setup, a scene, now something needs to happen. And yeah, I think, we were talking already about a poem being transformative, going from one place to another. And this poem stays in the same spot. It's got that great line about the want to sloth around. But then, what does that mean? And if you follow the model of that anglerfish poem, pushing that image of what slothing around would be, and then trying to listen to yourself, and why are you coming up with the directions you're coming up, and what are you really getting at, and why did this poem want to come out? What is that about this relationship? And I think instead of, a lot of times this happens, but once we sort of get a hint of the cognitive dissonance that we're really exploring in poems, the way that we're of two minds, we don't like the feeling. We're a little afraid of, cognitive dissonance is unpleasant. And so a lot of times poems touch on that sort of mystery and confusion and wonder and uncomfortableness that spark the poem. But as soon as they touch it, they run away. And I think this is a poem that did that too. So push farther in that and then see what's really there underneath, driving out this sloth image. Yeah. And David Booth says the shift from ocean imagery to forest is confusing. Maybe start with the second stanza and explore from there. Yeah. Yeah. Well, anyway, so those are my thoughts on those poems. Let me see. I haven't looked at Facebook in a bit. Oh, Cindy Bryant is here. She says hi. Okay. And it is a problem too with as David Booth says, shifting from the forest or the ocean imagery to the forest is a little bit confusing. And I agree. And you have to try to figure out. It's sort of one of those things that just happens in poems sometimes, where you make a leap into something, and you have to figure out how they actually connect. And could you end up having a monkey at the edge of the forest near the the headwaters of the river or something like that, and bring out that image, and the monkey was lying in the, I don't know how you could tie those together where it makes sense, but you want to have a sense that it wasn't an accident that you started with the ocean image, that's generating some kind of meaning too, and it was there for a reason, and then that the monkey and the sloth doing what sloths and monkeys do is there for a reason too, and it all ties together in a way that's right. So, yeah. And Jana McConaughey says, yeah, Ord Island. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Jamie Thomas says the leap from ocean to forest worked really well for me because of the playful language of her partner. It's a good point too. Another way you could handle that feeling of like it was a strange leap that didn't reconnect is you can do more leaps with it too. So we could go from the ocean to the forest to some other place and even comment on the fact that you just did. And that's where your discussion with the partner is taking you, and so, yeah. Morgan Feeney says, I guess on rereading, the ocean isn't a real ocean. It's a sleeping pill. Yeah, because it's the soft blankets. The surface soft blankets lapping again and again. Like the dream that, like half state sleep. But if we go to a forest in the poem, even though it's a metaphor, we're still in a forest. I mean, Yeah. Yeah, as D. Coleman says, ocean, waking up from a deep sleep. Yeah. So anyway, that's our thoughts about this poem. I think it's a great start. I love that line about the sloth. It just needs to push farther and see why it wanted to be written, because there was a reason, I think. Okay. That's 2 poems down. And now we're going to look for Mike's poems. So let me take a look for those. Hang on. Bear with me while I look. I think they're probably going to be down on the... Oh yeah, this doesn't work anymore. Oh no, it does. Where was that name again? Let's see. Mike. Sorry, I gotta find Mike's. Where was it? Sorry, I lost it. I thought I'd remember. Can you say the name again? Shape of Soup? I'm not seeing... I thought it was Michael. Sorry for this delay. Where? Brevity. Why can't I find your name? Oh, Michael or Mike Roulaine. Thank you. I'm not seeing that here. Let's see. Did he submit 2 Critique of the Week? Oh. Hang on. I gotta put this on silent. Oh, this is compelling video. Okay. Oh, there it is. I found it. I don't know why it wasn't coming. Okay. Found it. Whew. Okay. Here is the poem then. These are poems from Mike here. Shape of Soup. And let's see if Mike had any general questions first. Couple of questions. So since both these poems are quite brief, I'd love your thoughts on pacing in shorter works. How would you ensure the reader experiences enough depth without feeling rushed or incomplete? That's a good point. I love short poems. There's some masters of that. Maybe we'll talk about. In Caged, I made an effort to balance a nuanced and somewhat heavy theme with emerging layers of unexpected levity and humorous reference. How effectively do you think I manage that balance? And are there any suggestions you have for improving this kind of technique in general? I'd also love to hear any general thoughts you have on humor in poetry. Okay. Yeah, so unexpected levity, interesting in that, I think, the second poem. So let's take a look at these. The first one, as promised, is pretty short. This is Small Talk. So let's take a look. Small Talk. Yeah, so and Shape of Soup here says, Tim, for both these, I'd love any input on controlled contextual density in short poems. Yeah, okay. Small Talk. I throw a snowball, poorly packed, crumbling before it lands. A flicker of cold brushes your ear. You turn, but I'm too far behind, too clumsy to warrant suspicion. We walk on, the silence between us gathering like snow, fragile, uncertain, perfect. Well, that's interesting. You know, Small Talk. I love the way that the title undercuts and adds to the meaning of the poem. I think it's a great use of that cut, kind of a haiku-like cut in the title, where you don't think of the snowball as small talk. So the whole thing gets to become a metaphor for small talk, which is really interesting. A snowball poorly packed is really great about that. So I like the structure and what's going on in this poem to start with. I throw a snowball, poorly packed, crumbling before it lands. A flicker of cold brushes your ear. You turn, but I'm too far behind, too clumsy to warrant suspicion. We walk on, the silence between us gathering like snow, fragile, uncertain, perfect. And that perfect, of course, changes everything in the poem too, which is nice. I think there's a little bit, you talked about the density and stuff. I think there's some things you can cut from here, actually. And I think to make the poem even more tight. Yeah. So, and also, yeah. So it's the second sentence. So I think the first, small talk, I throw a snowball poorly packed, crumbling before it lands. I think that's a great metaphor for small talk. And it's really tightly packed, no pun intended, ironically. Just 3 little lines, and that says a lot, having it be called small talk. A flicker of cold brushes your ear. But then you turn, but I'm too far behind. Too clumsy to warrant suspicion. And the too clumsy, I don't understand either. Yeah, and Marilyn Carr says the first stanza threw me off. I was expecting similar meter for the rest of the poem. I almost thought it was going to hear rhyme. Yeah. And I think that's a good point in that, if you can get it as condensed as the rest, then I think it'd be a good thing. And we want to kind of keep that pattern. And I think you could. It could just be cold brushes your ear. You turn, but I'm too far behind to warrant suspicion. I think that's all you need. I don't think the clumsy and the flicker aren't really necessary. Malik says clumsy, not good at small talk. Well, I think we get that already, and I think, I don't know. I feel like it doesn't really fit right with the poem. We walk on, silence between us gathering like snow. And that was great. I wonder if the poem could just be ending here. What if the poem was, and I can't, let's see. What if I just do this really quick? Hang on. So you can tell me if this poem is better this way. We'll go like this. And we'll just, have this little window open. We call it small talk here. Or no, I guess, hang on, bear with me 1 second. Let me open it like a Google Doc. Here. So here's the small talk poem. Okay, so what if we just made it even more tight? So we have that first three lines. And then we wanted this, just get the cold brushes your ear. You turn, but I'm too far behind to warrant suspicion. And then what if we just ended this? And then we have three little stanzas that all kind of fit. I think this is a little less dense than the rest. But what if that's the whole poem? Small talk. I throw a snowball, poorly packed, crumbling before it lands. Cold brushes your ear. You turn, but I'm too far behind to warrant suspicion. We walk on, the silence between us gathering like snow. And what if it just ended there and let that sort of hang, and then we look back up at the title and realize the whole thing is a metaphor for small talk? Then we get to have this whole dance in our minds about how that is like small talk, and how, some little thing lands poorly, like some attempt at small talk, and it's not engaging and doesn't create better small talk. And then and then we have to live with the silence after the poor attempt at small talk, Yeah. So that's what I would do. I think just get a little more tense. If you have a poem that's tight, try to get it as tight as possible. And the poet I was going to suggest reading, which I always do, is Mike White is just a wonderful poet. And Andrea Cohen, who sadly has never submitted poems, and so we can never have her on as a Rattlecast guest. But if anybody knows Andrea, tell her to submit poems. I love her too. But Andrea Cohen writes little wonderful short poems too. I mean, it's that one about the Pulitzer, winning the Pulitzer Prize. Let me pull that up for you. Is it the Pulitzer they win, or the Nobel Prize? The committee weighs in, yeah. The committee weighs in. Sorry, hang on. Andrea Cohen. If you don't know this poem, it's a great little poem. It's from Three Penny Review. And here, take a look at this. The committee weighs in. I tell my mother I've won the Nobel Prize. Again, she says. Which discipline this time? It's a little game we play. I pretend I'm somebody else. She pretends she isn't dead. And that's how to make. And then, and calling it the committee weighs in adds to it too. And so, so that's how to get it condensed this way. It's a good example. So Mike White, Andrea Cohen, two poets to look at for this kind of poem. And I love this kind of poem too. If you want to have it more musical, Wendy Vitalock is the great poet at making really short, condensed musical poems that have a lot of rhyme and meter and packed into a tight space. So those two are the places I'd look. But anyway, so this is that's Small Talk. And I think a really great poem. I really like it a lot. Like there's a lot to like here. I think it could just be a little more condensed. Charles Simic is another great poet to mention too. I don't think, in my reading of Charles, it's a little longer than what we're talking about with like Mike White or Andrea Cohen, but yeah. There's some great poems. Yeah. Yeah. Janet McConaughey says Vidalock. No, it's Videlock. Vide, like Vide, Vide, Vidalock. What's the best short poem that we did? Let me see. Of Wendy's. Let me see. There was. Oh, here's the tiny. This is the most recent tiny one, and this is even smaller. And see how she does the same kind of thing with condensed poems, but has a rhyme in it too. So here's Wendy Vidalock. This is The Way It Goes. Driving by her old home on Mayfair, the cairn was gone, the tire swing still floating there. And so she's got the there rhyme, but that's the way it goes. And that, such a great condensed commentary on the way life moves on. Like we forget about the dead and remember the fun we can still have, Oh yeah, Dear Universe. Let's look at Dear Universe again too. Let's see. Yeah, this is Wendy Vidalock's Dear Universe. Another great poem. I'll read that one too. And they're short, so you might well. Dear Universe. In all this calm, in all this mist, these vague shaped continents begin to drift. A finger lifts, falls again. A foghorn sounds, passionless. Do you wonder what we are in all this calm and all this mist? Wolf prints, red clay, a slender wrist. Murder, magic, ballet. So that's Wendy Vidalock. I love that. That's one of my favorite poems. Thanks for pointing that out too. So great. Another great one, Kay Ryan. Another great, Kay Ryan's got a lot of great short poems. A little bit longer again than Mike White, but the Niagara River is wonderful. Anyway, yeah. So great. Yeah, you definitely love diving into how to become condensed. And I do. It's one of the things I wish personally that I could be better at, is doing these little tiny poems, because those are like some of my favorite poems, and maybe my absolute favorite poems are those kind of just such a tiny little nugget that just says so much. Kimberly Gibson Trent says W.S. Merwin's Elegy, another great example. Okay, let's look at the other poem, another short one, and this is Caged. And this, I won't remind you in case you forgot, because we should just try to read cold anyway. This is Caged. Again, the poet is Mike Rolane, Shape of Soup over here, who's had great comments on the poems and is a participant all the time. Here's Caged. We are a muted array of desperate poetry for poets flailing about a shrink-wrapped world, bouncing off walls to the rhythm of Lachezium, lies and lurid stars, ghosting in seconds like matchstick men stealing vampire kisses. So that's interesting. So what is this word? Lachesism? Lachesism? I don't know what that is. Let me try to look it up. A term for the desire to experience a disaster, such as a plane crash or fire, in order to be transformed and strengthened. The term comes from the Greek goddess Lachesis, one of the fates who controlled the length of each person's life. So that's interesting. Caged. We are a muted array of desperate poetry for poets flailing about a shrink-wrapped world, bouncing off walls to the rhythm of I don't even know how to say it. Lacheism. Lies and lurid stars. Yeah, is anybody... So that's a difficult word. One of the things that I say kind of often is that if there's a word that is easy to just phonetically say, it's a lot easier to slip it in as a big word in a poem, and we can sort of accept it more. If it's hard to say, it really throws the poem off. And so not only does this have a difficult meaning, at least for me, it's not something I'm familiar with, and I doubt most people are familiar with it too, but we can see in the chat. But the fact that it's hard to say really takes it out of the poem too. And so I would maybe, if you have something like this, and a better place is the title. Because then it doesn't. Then you know going in, I don't know what this means. You can look it up beforehand, and it doesn't take you out of the poem and sort of ruin the experience of it. To try to figure out both how to say that and what it means. Let's see. But I do love the idea. Caged. We are a muted array of desperate poetry for poets flailing about a shrink-wrapped world. That idea of a shrink-wrapped world, I think that the start of the poem works really well. Bouncing off walls, which is kind of a cliche. To the rhythm is a kind of cliche too. So that whole chunk, isn't great. And then that's hard reach. And the lyrid, I don't know what lyrid is either. Is that a different one of the fates? I have to admit, terrible That's a meteor shower. I'm terrible with Greek mythology. I can't keep it anything straight. I never could. I tried many times, but I just can't. Ghosting in seconds, like matchstick men stealing vampire kisses. And I like the ghosting in seconds, like matchstick men I like, but the stealing vampire kisses, I'm not sure. I don't know. I have a lot harder time following this poem than the other poem that we saw. And and I think because I don't understand some of the references maybe at the end, the humor aspect, that I'm just not getting it. So it's like over my head, I think. The concept of the first half and what that means, or most of it, especially looking up what Lacaism is I find that interesting. I think it's a really interesting topic to write about. The fact that we have such safety that we're sort of desperate for some kind of like chaos and tragedy just so we have something to write about, which is kind of funny. And maybe that's what he means by the humor of it. There's a dark humor in that, but it is really true. I mean, we sort of exploit tragedies sometimes just because, the truth is that we really don't reconcile is that we are the safest, wealthiest, happiest, or not happiest, but people ever to live. Like if the comforts that we have and the security and safety and the likelihood of living a full life and not being, have some brutal death and shortened is bigger than anybody that's ever lived on the entire planet Earth. We are the 1% of the 1% already, no matter what, and it's something that makes us unhappy in a weird way because if we who was it that said if we actually found paradise and an afterlife, the first thing we do is break something just to see it break. Dostoevsky. Anyway, like there's that problem to it too, and it's an interesting thing to be talking about. I don't understand like the second half with the vampire kisses and the matchstick men though. So let's see. I haven't looked at the chat, so let's see what So it says, okay, so the humor here is in our layered references to Nicolas Cage, his filmography and career. Well, I don't know. I don't know enough about that, yeah. Yeah, I didn't get that at all. It's funny, I was on a ghost tour with Katie in New Orleans in the French Quarter. And the whole time there was like a running joke about how much the guide hated Nick Cage. And I still don't remember even if there was a punchline to it. It was just on and on about how much everywhere we stopped, it was like, at least it's not Nick Cage. But I don't really, I'm not, I've seen some of his movies, but I don't know how that references it. I think Matchstick Men is a movie, but I've never seen it. So I think the reference is there. Yeah, no one knows Nick Cage well enough. Maybe the title should be Nick Caged, says Kimberly Gibson Tran. Yeah, maybe. I mean, I don't know. I think, yeah. So we just don't get it. We don't get the references. I don't think anybody does. Okay. So anyway, so that's it. So this poem doesn't really come across. Although I like some of the one layer that I understand is an interesting thing to be talking about. Yeah, Shebasu says, my hope was that the straighter through line would still stand on its own. This is a learning experience. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, well, interesting. It's sort of like, it feels more like a poem with an Easter egg inside it. Like there's an inside joke about what it's really about. Like famously, or maybe not famously, if you don't know, that the Road Less Traveled by Robert Frost, the most famous poem that everyone thinks is a poem about taking the less the more difficult road as a challenge in life to make your life more interesting. And everybody has that as like a mantra. I chose the road less traveled by, was really Frost making fun of his friend who was indecisive about unimportant things and couldn't make up his mind, even though the choices didn't matter. And if you look at that poem, both roads are equally kind of unworn, and he describes them sort of similarly. There's really no difference between the two roads, and then his friend is like acting like it's the biggest choice in his life, and it's really the whole thing is a joke, sort of making fun of his friend. But you don't know that unless you kind of know or paying really, really close attention. And most people, 99% of people who read that, have no idea. Yeah, so Kimberly says the Road Not Taken, the most overrated poem of the 20th century. And let's take a look at that poem. Um, just really quick. Because it is fun. And that's how you sort of bury a joke in a poem. And you know, some people do a lot with that. So let's take a look quickly at this. The Road Not Taken. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both, and be one traveler long I stood and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other just as fair. See, it's just as fair. There's really no difference. And having perhaps the better claim, but perhaps, who knows, because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as far as that passing there, I had worn them really about the same. So this poem is actually just a joke, and if you're in on the joke, it's actually really funny. And both that morning equally lay, and leaves no step. So they're, you know, both in that morning equally lay, and leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. And so, you know, and so it is like a really funny inside joke when you read it from that context. It makes the whole poem, and that's why I think it's not one of the most underrated poems. It's actually a really fun poem because it works on those two levels. Like, I mean, people have that as tattoos, you know, that I took the one less traveled by. I'm sure that's on like 1,000 people's arms right now. And they think that it really does make all the difference when it really doesn't. And there's like a whole swirl of jokes like built in there. And commentary on life and the way that we do think these choices where so much is just random and arbitrary happenstance that we're, you know, and that our choices, we don't really know what's down, you know? And so it's really interesting commentary in that way too. So I think it's actually a brilliant poem. I think it's great on the number of levels that it works. And even if most people don't get that, is makes it a really wonderful poem. Yeah. So there's The Road Not Taken by Frost. Okay, well, anyway, so that's how. So you can have like a Nicolas Cage joke Easter egg that like you understand and your friends understand if they know you well, or like if, you know, you have really close readers and scholars, they'll get the joke and other people won't. And I think like playing on that two levels, I mean, a lot of Shakespeare comedy is that sort of just two-level humor where half the characters know what they're talking about and the other don't, and that friction between the two, it can be really fun. And about humor in general, you know, it's really interesting that punch and that turn, that setup and punchline type structure that makes something funny is also what makes poetry have movement in that magic spell too. The ah and the ha, aha are very similar. That like laugh out loud, I can't help that I you know, found that funny, and then laughter itself is a way of us bonding as a group over something. But then there's an internal version of that that's like that that you get after you read a great poem that it evokes some kind of physiological response. And so the two are very closely played because they have to do with surprise, setup, expectation, subverting expectation, and the pleasure that we get in that, and how surprise and things we don't expect hit on our consciousness. And so I think there's a lot in common with humor, and I think it's funny to be, you know, it's fun to play with that in poems. So I think a good job with that. I think we need, you know, in this context, so if you wanted it to be, and I guess I should put this on the screen, if you wanted it to be something where it's like that, where it's like an inside joke that we don't get the Nick Cage, you know, keep all this stuff and then just make the poem really work on its own as a separate poem, which it doesn't quite yet. The through line that you mentioned, to me, isn't quite there yet. It starts out really well, but then I think the conclusion didn't live up to it, so it didn't feel like a full poem without an extra layer, and it turned out the extra layer was the inside joke. Yeah, so Shave of Soup says I should have been more overt, I think. Yeah, I agree. I think it's not quite there yet, but interesting. I really like the first poem too, though. Okay, so great submissions. Thanks for sharing those. And let's see. I'll do one more. Why not? It's 207. So let's take a look at one more submission. Oop, I got to delete. Okay. And the oldest one now is from Simran Jahal from Edinburgh, Scotland. Okay. And a couple questions here. What are some tailored techniques that a writer can consider for different length poems? I have attached one extremely long one. Oh, that's right. We were to move on because extremely long, we don't have time for an extremely long. This is exactly what happened last week too. Let's see. Yeah, I'm going to fast forward to a shortish poem. Okay. Okay, so this is oop. Okay, we're going to do Jessica Little Elk. And there's one little poem, Complete Me, by Jessica Little Elk from Arizona. Here we go. The poem is called Complete Me. In the eve of contrition, I found myself in the eye of the storm. I still rebelled in conflict and chaos. I could never leave, and the pain that held me held no need to grieve in foggy confusion. Did we do this poem already? I keep having that feeling. Maybe people are submitting revisions. That's what happened last week. Somebody had a revision that they just changed the names, and it really wasn't much of a revision. I'm complete. Yeah. I'm not sure. I think we might have done this before. I'm going to look it up later. Yeah. Kimberly Gibson looks at the word revision. Let's look at the next one instead. This is Christy Lawson. This will close out this way from Virginia. And let me see if there's any questions from Christy. No questions. So Damming the Waters, and we'll look at the second one next. Okay. Damming the Waters. Here we go. Damming the waters. And then one day, when his eyes show sorrow, you will stop yourself asking, the dam and the waters that once breached, the best laid obstruction, carving its forever slits, and instead stick to the business, that idle talk, and say, go, now, leave. You will stop yourself wanting, returning, reliving, take back, take up, take care your mangled heart, and the dam may fail yet. And for this, you hope, or when hope desires connection, you will stop yourself believing, staying rooted but flowing with the waters all brought forth by the Almighty, as they sometimes rush by so ruthlessly, and say, watch me go now. So this is interesting. I think the idea of the dam kind of works, and then I like the ending. I think the last line, the watch me go is a nice turn to it. So I think there's like a setup and a conclusion that kind of work in this poem, but we have a lot of vague, really boring kind of writing in the middle. And so I think it needs more. And as Desiree Crane said, I don't feel let in. I think that's what is the problem. It doesn't feel as engaging as it could. So we have this structure of the dam, and there's kind of a pun. Damming the waters, with that two spellings of dam and the two definitions of that, those homophones. Damming the waters. And then one day when his eyes show sorrow. So I think part of the problem is when his eyes show sorrow, it's an abstraction. It's a show don't tell type thing. We're not feeling the sorrow or seeing why or the context. The eyes are showing it, but we're not even seeing how the eyes show it. There's just not a lot of detail there. It's a summarizing kind of generality with an emotional label. You will stop asking, and that can, if we were just like diving right in, then we push past it, that can work if we're going to do detail later. We don't have enough detail. You will stop yourself asking, and the dam waters that once, so asking what? So that's why we don't feel let in. We don't know about the sorrow. We don't get to feel it, and then we don't know what we're asking. You will stop yourself asking. And dam the waters that once breached the best laid obstruction, carving its forever slits. Yeah, and so this ends up being pretty abstract, as Mark Grenier says here, and instead stick to the business, that idle talk, and say, go now, leave. You will stop yourself wanting. And who's the you? I guess, we're just very disconnected from the poem at this point. And there's not a lot of detail. So if you're gonna start talking about a dam, like describe the dam, like give us imagery, like we got with the anglerfish. Keep going to that. It's nice to have a poem that we can just sort of touch back on. Scroll back in the timeline, reread the anglerfish, and see how we were gripped by the detail there. If we were gripped by the detail of the dam, what does the river look like? How big is the dam? What kind of dam it is? Look up on Wikipedia the different ways dams are made. Like build this dam in our minds so that can be this concrete thing that we can push the metaphor off of. And yet we get very little about that, and we get little about the situation either. We don't really know what the sorrow is about, what the relationship is between the two people. You always assume kind of a romantic relationship because that's what poems like this are usually about. But we don't really know, and it could be any other kind of relationship, just details, as Bethany Jarmel just said. So tell us, what's going on. And if you're building this damn imagery, play with that imagery, get it really detailed, and then see where your mind goes and why you're coming up with the descriptions that you do. And that'll surprise yourself into pushing the poem in a new place. So there's that. Details, exactly. You will stop yourself wanting, returning, reliving, take back, take up, take care of your mangled heart, and the dam may fail yet. So we're still abstracting this dam. We don't really see it, and we don't know what failure means on either I guess we do on a literal level, or the metaphorical level. We know what it looks like when a dam collapses, just because we do, but we don't know what that means to the situation. And we don't know what your dam would be like, how big it is either, so we don't get a lot even when it collapses. And for this, when hope desires connection, you will stop yourself believing. So who is the you? And what are they believing? It's just so vague. Yeah, what's the dam holding back is what PMB says. And yeah, you will stop. And yeah, so staying rooted but flowing with the waters brought forth by the Almighty, as they sometimes rush by so ruthlessly and say, watch me go now. And there's something about the watch me go now that I really like, though. And so I think there was a spark of creativity that got that line out, that the after the dam breaks, that's what the waters are saying. It's there's something there that's interesting. So just details. We need more detail to connect with, and we don't have it. We don't have the story, and we don't have the images, and you have to have one or the other. Be strong enough that we have something to connect with. So tell us more. Tell, and that'll help. Tell us what the story really is about. Okay, let's take a look at the other poem, and this is Deucalion. Man, where people are really smarter than me today. Let me see what that is. And in Greek mythology, Deucalion was the king of Phthia in Thessaly, who survived a flood that destroyed humanity. He is the son of Prometheus and the husband of Pyrrha. And so Pyrrha, I assume maybe Pyrrha has to do with Pyrrhic victory. And Prometheus, we know, I think, right? But see, even Prometheus is not the... Who is Prometheus? What is it about Prometheus? He stole fire from the gods and gave it to humans, so he's the god of fire. It's crafty counsel. Okay. So, Deucalion to Pyrrha, and so I told you. I too know the emptiness, the isolation of watching these ruins take shape from the furious deluge swallowing all in its wake. Apart from us on these dry peaks of Mount Parnassus, where we stay until the sea is no longer angry, we are spared in time, and we wish for the long agos, for the days of old. But remember, the sea shall hold me also. We throw only the stones behind, as covered eyes well up with tears. We mustn't look, lest we behold the mystery of one's mother. So again, here, the same kind of things apply. If you look at that poem, Small Talk, where we had the whole thing being a metaphor for the small talk. In this way, it feels like the whole thing is, again, a metaphor for a relationship. We don't get the access to it because it stays so I to you, and I'm Deucalion talking to Pyrrha. I mean, to me, that's just so hard to hold that in my head. And it's not very a vivid reference, in the way that we could have the metaphor be triggered by that snowball being like small talk, And then, so that's first of all. And then we don't have a sense of the detail that could emerge from this, even going the way that we do. And again, the details are just so important. So I too know the emptiness, the isolation of watching these ruins take shape from the furious deluge, swallowing all in its wake. And so swallowing all in its wake is a bit of a cliche. And there's something weird about watching ruins take shape. That's also a sort of an interesting word choice. And by interesting, I mean, I'm not sure it makes sense. Would they really be taking shape if they're being buried and torn apart by a deluge? But even putting that aside, there's an opportunity here to describe that wake and to see what it looks like. what is happening down there? Like, what are the rocks and the pillars doing, and are people running from it, and all that stuff? How high is the water, and where did it come from, and what does it look like? What can you compare it to? How can we describe it? There's a real opportunity to go, after swallowing all in its wake, to describe it here. But instead we say, apart from us on these dry peaks. So we go back to a distance in a different scene instead of elaborating on that scene and letting it kind of develop a little bit more in a vivid way. Apart from on these dry peaks of Mount Parnassus, where we stay until the sea is no longer angry. And the sea being angry is sort of a cliche too. So if we had a way that we described its like anger vividly, then we could sort of describe it reciting a little more vividly too. So we just don't get the detail here that makes us engage with a poem on that level. Are we spared in time, and we wish for the long agos, for the days of old, but remember. So here we're getting into real abstractions and away from the story yet again. The sea shall hold me also. We throw only the stones behind as covered eyes well up with tears. And again, we're abstracting and adding emotional labels to things. The tears don't make us feel tears. We have to actually feel, So we have to know about the context and feel, step inside empathetically with the person who is sad to feel the tears, and then we'll connect with it. But here, we're just being told there are tears, but we don't really know why, and we don't really feel them at all. But we mustn't look lest we behold the mystery of one's mother. And then the mother, I think at the end, probably refers to some Greek thing that's Greek to me. I don't know, with the story of Prometheus and all these other people. But I don't really know what to make of that aspect of it. But I can feel the grain of something interesting underneath the poem. Like there's a real emotion. It's one of those poems where you can feel the real emotion. Like I'm keeping it at distance by using this analogy to the Greek mythology about what I really want to talk about, but I'm not talking about it. I don't know, again, just tell us the story, give us details, let us know who you are. Like instead of, this reference, like tell us, instead of "and so I to you," like tell us what the actual situation is and the title that would help, and then give us more details in the poem. That's what I would say. Jamie Thomas says this feels like the book of Promethea by Helen Siccius. It's about the mother, then I would dig in there. Yeah, Mike Greener says this is a good beginning, but then drifts into vague, unconnected illusion. And Kimberly Gibson Tran, I crave specific details, references to modern day. This poem could be saved with a pack of cigarettes or a coffee ring. That's a good idea. Like a little image that brings us into the actual present that it's referring to would be really helpful. And Maria Alberg says, I think the mystery of one's mother is the most interesting part. The poem may really want to start there. Now, that's an interesting thing, too. I think so. Yeah, but again, details. That's what makes us connect. And then once we connect, we can really feel and experience the poem along with you. So that's the key. Okay, well, that's going to wrap up the show for this week. Thanks everybody who participated. That last poet, I should say again, was Christy Lawson from Virginia. Thanks, Christy, for sharing that. Thanks to Shape of Soup for those really fun poems that Mike shared. Let's see. So this week's guest on the Rattlecast, and I have to actually get the wait a second. This week's guest on the Rattlecast is going to be. There we go. This week's guest is going to be none other than Bethany Jarmel, who you just saw in the comments here. She's been showing up on the prompt lines the last month really regularly, but a long-time contributor to all of the stuff we do, really, over the last several years. She's got a new book, Lightning is a Mother, really interesting poem about the mother of us all, the Mother Nature and things like that. So really great play with the title there. And really interesting poems from Bethany, who's going to be the guest this Sunday. Now, the prompt for this week was I have to look it up really quick, but the new website is so fast it just pops right up. Write a poem that includes an no, wait. That was last week's prompt. Did I not update that? Let me try it over here. I thought I did. Maybe it got tripped up. No, that is. Oh, that's the thing, because I already wrote my poem. That's why it feels old. That's one of the rare times I actually wrote the poem, mostly wrote ahead of time. So that is the prompt this week. Sorry. The prompt was, Write a poem that includes an unexpected vow. And that is the prompt for this week, February 23rd. The guest is Bethany Jarmel. Her book is Lightning as a Mother that we'll be talking about and sharing from. That's Rattlecast number 282, Sunday, February 23rd. The regular time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Hope to see you there. Hope you have a great weekend in the meantime, and we'll talk to you later. Goodbye.